Hey everybody. I was just reminiscing yesterday about an experience I had when I first started keeping fish, or fairly early on in my fish keeping days. And while it was terrifying at the moment, I can look back at it now and laugh. And so I thought I would take a few minutes to share my experience with you. Now, I've said before that I am not very handy when it comes to building things, measuring things, cutting stuff in a straight line. I'm more of an ideas guy. I can think of the stuff, I can explain to somebody how to do it, but when I try to put my hands on it and manifest it into the physical three-dimensional world, it never comes out right. The best you're going to do with me is maybe half a bubble off, and that's if you're lucky. So keeping that in mind, I built the shelves you can see behind me that hold two 55-gallon tanks and a 40 breeder at the far end of it. It's one whole length of shelf that runs down the whole wall. So when I first started putting it up, I did my best to make it level, but my basement floor is not level. It's angled so that the water will run to the end of the basement where the drain is. So I'm basically working off an uneven floor and so on and so forth. I did my best. I got it as level as I could get it. But when I built the set of shelves, I wanted it to have the appearance of simply floating in the air. And so I simply made it by mounting these 90-degree angle brackets against the wall and then laid the boards across the top of that. Now, I did the math as far as how many gallons of water and the weight that was going to be involved and so on and so forth. And I way overkilled it with these angle brackets. Each one I think was rated for 1,500 pounds, and I put one, or at least I started by putting one on every single stud down the wall. And so I thought that I was clearly safe as far as how much weight these things were going to hold. And eventually, after beginning shooting my early YouTube videos, some people started seeing how I had the fish tanks just sitting there, and everybody was like, oh man, you really need to put something, like put a brace underneath of there and take some of that weight off of those little brackets. There's no way that is going to hold. So the more people kept saying that, the more I started getting a little nervous about it, and eventually I was like lying in bed at night imagining, the crashing sound of, my brackets tearing out of the wall in the middle of the night. So I decided I would go ahead and do that. I could just simply cut pieces of wood, stick them up under there, problem solved. Don't have to do anything real complicated about it. But of course, I'm the one that was making the measurements. I'm the one that was actually making the cuts in the wood. And I eventually got, when I started, I got the first brace right in the middle. Actually, let me show you what we're talking about here. So those are the 90-degree angle brackets. And then this upright brace here is the first one I installed, and it's just a 1x that goes from the floor, and then it braces against a 2x4 to support all three of the pieces of wood I've got there. Fairly simple. And that was the first one I installed, so that's where the story is going to pick up. All right, that's simple enough, right? Just measure the length of the piece of wood, cut it to the right length, and the idea was to put it in there firmly enough that it would just sort of wedge in there, and then I'd have to take a rubber mallet and sort of notch the bottom of it to get it in there firm. I didn't want to lift up the shelf, I just wanted to put some support on the upright. So when I put it in there, I wound up lifting up the whole shelf. And by this point, I'm already starting to get frustrated, and I try to work on this, but it's a bad trait of mine. I get frustrated very easily, and when I start to get frustrated, I tend to yank stuff and shove stuff and bang stuff, and I usually just walk away when I'm starting to get frustrated, because it's never good to do those kinds of things. So I was getting to that point when I finally got this piece of upright cut. It was the middle of summer. I've been working on this all afternoon. I was sweaty. I thought that this shelf should have been done long ago. It should have been really easy, and here I am trying to cut this stupid piece of wood again to get it to fit under there. And when I finally got it to go under there, I had to take the rubber mallet and I banged it, and I finally got it wedged up straight. And when I did so, it lifted the shelf up to the point where the upright was now taking weight off of the brackets on the wall, and the water was leaning backwards in the tank. I lifted the shelf up so it was no longer a flat shelf, it was leaning backwards. So that's obviously not going to work. I got to pull this thing out and I got to cut it again. And so I tried to pull it out and it would not come out, and I could not get it out. And so at this point, my frustration went over the top, and I laid down on my back, got down, I'm looking up at the tank in front of me, got the brace right here, and I kicked the brace out from underneath of me. And at that moment, I realized I had done a really, really stupid thing. That shelf dropped that far. I mean, the whole thing dropped and went thud. And the water in the tank sloshed back and forth. Some of the water actually sloshed up and out of the tank and down onto me, lying on the floor below this 55-gallon tank full of water. I don't know if I pointed that out or not. I did this with the tanks full of water and fish and everything else. I was just working on this while the tanks were up and running. And when that shelf dropped and that tank fell like that, I laid there for a moment, I recomposed myself, and then my brain kicked back in, and I realized I should get out of there because I've now kicked the brace out, and that, you know, it may be slow, but those you know, brackets may still get ripped out of the wall. Fortunately, long story short, is none of that happened and everything was fine. I went and cut the piece of wood to the right length. When I brought it back, I tapped it in. It went in just the way I wanted it to. And I'm happy to say that I was right all along. Those brackets were very clearly up to the task of holding those tanks up. If you can bounce those tanks off of, you know, again, this was with 2 full 55 gallons and a 40 at the other end. And that center brace was the very first one I started with, figuring starting center, and then I'll do the 2 ends. And so ultimately I do have 3 of those braces now, 1 at each end, and the one we were just talking about in the center. But man, I'm telling you, when I kicked that brace out and that thing dropped, my heart stopped. I thought that was so dumb. I just imagined a whole entire 55-gallon tank coming right down on my face. So again, fortunately that did not happen, but you know, live and learn. When I put the other 2 braces in at either end, I was a lot more careful. I measured a little more carefully. If it wasn't going in, I didn't force it. I went and recut or did whatever. I don't know. I don't remember the details. I think my brain sort of has focused all its energy on that one moment of trauma there. So anyway, that was my story for today. If I think of anything else, or if you enjoy these kinds of stories of my early days at fish keeping or whatever, my mishaps and wacky adventures and whatnot, let me know, and I can always share stuff like this in the future. So thanks for watching this one. Hope you enjoyed that. Make sure you leave your comments down below. I'd be interested to see if you've had any similar type experiences. See you on the next one.